Well, welcome everybody once again. Do we have anybody who has a question? Let's start from there. Any questions before we begin? Any questions? Any questions before we start? I don't know if Raymond can hear me. If you can hear me, you can raise your hand so that I can allow your mic. Oh, okay. All right. So what question do you have on webbook? Let's start from there. What's the question you have on webbook? You can type it in the chat so that I can just read and then answer the question you have. What question do you have on webbook? Okay. All right. All right. Okay. Um. Oh, okay. Let me just read out your question. Oh, okay. Okay. All right. No problem. We're going to touch on webbook. All right. As we go on in the course of the class today. All right. We're going to touch on that. All right. For those who don't know, webbook is basically webbook is basically a way to trigger your Jenkins pipeline. All right. When you want to trigger your Jenkins pipeline automatically based on push events, which means if somebody pushes anything to your Git repository, right, you want your Jenkins pipeline to be triggered automatically, right? That is, what a webhook basically is, all right? So we're going to look at that as we go on in the course of the class, all right? Okay, so let's get into the business of today. All right, let me just bring up my system. All right, please let me know if you can hear me clearly because last week we had a little bit of a challenge. I think maybe my mic was not loud enough or something. All right, so can you indicate in the chat if you can hear me clearly? Please let me know that you can hear me clearly. All right, if you can indicate in the chat, that'll be fine. If you can hear me clearly. Okay, so we have one person. Other people, can you please signify? Okay, all right. Thank you. Okay, all right. Thank you so much. All right. All right. Okay, thank you. All right. We stopped last week at the point, where we installed our Jenkins server. That was where we stopped. Okay, so, all right. So somebody's asking a question. Oh, okay, that's interesting. That's very interesting. All right, so just a minute. I'm just trying to log in into my AWS account, and then we begin our conversation today. All right, so let me share my screen. All right, so if you have any question as we're moving on, all right, you can drop it in the chat, all right, and you can also raise your hand so that we can take your questions. All right. So you don't have to wait until maybe the end of the class. If there's anything that I'm talking about that you do not understand, I would really encourage that you maybe drop it in the chat, or you can also signify by the reason of your hand. All right. So that we can make sure that everybody is carried along. All right. So let's get into the conversation today. Like I said, in the last class, we stopped off at the point where we installed Jenkins. That was where we stopped. All right, so I'm going to start my Jenkins server. All right, so that we can log in into it and see how we can build, all right, our Jenkins pipeline. In the meantime, I'm going to log in into my GitHub account. Okay. All right, so let's go to instances. So here's our Jenkins server. So let me click on that instance state. So let's start the instance. All right. So Jenkins instance is all is coming up. All right. So I'm just going to change the view state to running because I only want to see instances that are running, right? All right. So Jenkins is coming up. Let's refresh it. It should be open now. All right. So here is our Jenkins public IP. So what do? I can copy this, drop it here. Don't forget your column 8080. All right. So let's, all right. So Jenkins server still booting up. So let's wait for that to come up. All right. So starting Jenkins. All right. All right. So let's just wait a little while. Okay. So our Jenkins server is up. So we have to log in. So let's see. I'm not sure I remember the username and password, but let me try. Let me just guess. Oh, okay. Uh, we didn't use anything complex after all. Right. So here is our Jenkins server. We've been able to log in into it, and now it's time to create a job. Right? It's time to create a job. Now, when you talk about CI/CD pipeline, all right, of course, you're talking about integration, you're talking about deployment, right? What that means is that, all right, your pipeline will contain some kind of, connection to some external services, all right, that your Jenkins will connect to. And the pipeline is also going to have some connection, all right, to some other services where your application, all right, will be deployed to. Okay, for example, your Jenkins is going to be connected to your GitHub, and that is because the GitHub is where you have your code, right? Your application code is stored on GitHub. So Jenkins has to integrate with your GitHub. Now, when Jenkins integrates with your GitHub account, now whatever code you have in that repository, right, what you want to use Jenkins to achieve is to build that application and deploy that application to your deployment server. Now, within that pipeline, there are things you have to configure. right? For example, we're going to be looking at, scanning our code, right, with SonarQube, which is for code analysis. And the purpose of that is you want to check your code for bugs, you want to check your code for errors, you want to make sure that your code, complies with what is called the OWASP, all right, top 10, you know, cybersecurity benchmark, all right? So you want to make sure that your code is, meets, all right, those standards, right? That means all of these softwares have to be integrated, all right, with Jenkins, right? In some other ways as well, you may also want to configure your Jenkins in such a way that it should be able to send notifications, maybe to a Slack channel, for example, so that if any job fails, right, your team members are notified. If the job is built successfully, they also get a notification, right? So you want to have all of that integration, okay? Now, one thing you must understand about Jenkins is that for every of this integration that we have talked about, you have to find the appropriate plugin that works, all right, with these external service, okay? Because the truth is, Jenkins is more like a middleman, right? Connecting you with other services, integrating all of different services, and also deploying different services. All right. You can think of Jenkins as a food processing machine. All right. That you put the raw material on the one side. All right. The engine processes that raw material, and then on the other side, it produces an output, all right, of maybe a finished product. That is what Jenkins is. So there's integration on one side, and then on the other side, there is deployment, right? So Jenkins is basically like in the middle, okay? So now, today, we want to take an example. We want to connect Jenkins with our GitHub profile, all right? I already have a script that I'm going to share with us, just a simple deployment to EC2 instance, all right? Now, we are going to integrate Jenkins with our GitHub account, and we're going to configure a webhook, all right? And we are also going to deploy a shell script, all right, to our EC2 instance. So this is the idea. This is what we want to achieve, okay, with Jenkins today. Now, we already have Jenkins installed. So the first thing we're going to do is to create a job, all right, in Jenkins. So the kind of job we want to create is a pipeline job. Now, within that pipeline, we want to connect Jenkins to GitHub, right? That is one step. Now, the other step is that the shell script that we have on our GitHub account, we want Jenkins to download that shell script and, all right, run that shell script on our EC2 instance that we're going to deploy on AWS. All right. So on one hand, Jenkins is going to connect to GitHub, fetch whatever script that we have in our GitHub account, take that script and help us to deploy that script, all right, on an EC2, all right, instance. And that's what we want to do. And what is the shell script going to do? The shell script is basically going to install Apache on our EC2 instance, download a template, and then replace the default Apache web page with the template that will be downloaded. That is the simple use case that we want to consider, all right, today. So again, what are we trying to do with Jenkins? We're connecting Jenkins with our GitHub account. Jenkins will, all right, on our behalf, download whatever it is that we have in the GitHub repo, take that script and execute that script on an EC2 instance that we're going to deploy on AWS, all right? So what you must understand is now we are not doing that ourselves. Jenkins is doing that deployment on our behalf. So the only thing that we are going to do is to give Jenkins, all right, an instruction on how to go about the whole, all right, process. All right. So that is exactly what we want to try and achieve. So let us begin. Any question before we start? Any questions? Any questions? Do you have anybody raising up their hand? Okay, so let's go ahead and let's configure, all right, Jenkins. Now I have these, script in my repository, and this is an example Jenkins file that we are going to be using. All right, this is the Jenkins file that we're going to be working with. All right, so well, before we even go to this point or get to this point, let me click on dashboard. All right, and then let's click on new item. Okay, now on the new item page, I am going to choose, all right, pipeline as the job that I want to configure. So let's wait. I don't know why this is dragging again. Okay, she has a question for us. All right, you can unmute your mic, Shay, and then ask a question.
All right, so for the template, is
Mm,
it one was, I mean, typically write the script from, let's say from zero, or are there site or somewhere one can get a template and then modify it to what you want, or one must always write a template from start to finish?
mm. All right, yeah, so you can write the template yourself, or you can also generate the template using ChatGPT, right? But what I would advise is when you're using ChatGPT, you must make sure that whatever it is that ChatGPT is giving to you is something that you understand and you can modify yourself. Because ChatGPT can be very wrong, right? Can be very wrong sometimes. All right. So you can write it from the scratch. All right. You can also generate it using ChatGPT or from any platform. But what is important is that you understand, all right, the script that you're using. It's something you should, all right, be able to interpret. Okay. All right. So if you understand it, right, even if you get it from anywhere, you can modify it to suit your own need. All right. So I think that knowledge is what we really need. Okay. So that's what we need. Is that clear?
Yes. It's good.
Okay. So I'm going to name the job Jenkins pipeline, and I'm going to go with this pipeline option right here, and then click on OK. Now, when we talk about the Jenkins pipeline, all right, and when we talk about the template that Shay mentioned, all right, now there are two ways to write your Jenkins pipeline script. There is what is called the declarative pipeline, and there's what is called the scripted pipeline. Now, I'm going to show you the two. So let me just scroll down. So here, it says that these are sample pipelines, right? Now, let me click on this example. Now, this example right here is an example of what is called a declarative pipeline, okay? So if you come here and then you click on Gator plus Maven, all right, this is still an example of what? Of a declarative pipeline. Now, what is a declarative pipeline? When we say something is declarative in nature, right? Because, for those who have an understanding, about programming languages, we have imperative languages, we have declarative languages and all of that, right? Now, declarative, all right, when you say something is declarative, it means that you don't have to explicitly, all right, tell Jenkins what to do. You only give Jenkins an idea of what you want Jenkins to achieve. And then Jenkins figures out, all right, exactly how that job should be done. All right. Which means you really don't have to, all right, specify every nitty gritty, right? You just have to give Jenkins, certain information, and then Jenkins exactly knows, all right, what needs to be done. Okay. Now, when we get to Terraform, we're going to talk more, all right, on declarative. Okay, because Terraform is also a declarative language, right? So, but the idea is that you only give them what to work with, all right, and then they figure out how to achieve whatever it is that you've defined, right? Now, the other example is a scripted pipeline. Now, look at that. A scripted pipeline is very close, all right, to when you're writing a normal, when you're developing an application. Okay, so you have all these dev, right? This is defining a function. You have all these with if else, all right, Unix, all this jargon that you see here, right? That is scripted. Now, in the world of DevOps today, nobody is using the scripted pipeline, right? We are all using declarative pipeline because that is easier, right? It is more cleaner, it is more understandable, it is more human readable, all right, than the scripted pipeline, right? Because when somebody sees a declarative pipeline, it is easy for even a novice, right, with a little experience can read and understand what you're trying to do when they see a declarative, all right, pipeline. But a scripted pipeline, if you're not a programmer, you may not be able to understand all those things that you see here. Okay, so we're going to be going with, all right, a declarative, all right, pipeline. Okay, now let me take you up here. So now we clicked on pipeline, and then we have all these configurations right here. All right, so here we have the general tab. All right, we have the description. You can give your job a description, and then you have a few options right here. Well, some of these options, you may not even use it. All right, and then you have the build triggers. So at this level is where you configure your trigger, right? Where you configure what is called polling, which means you want to connect your GitHub account with Jenkins. So at every point in time, all right, if there's any push event, right, something more like a signal or more like a payload is sent to your Jenkins server. And then that particular pipeline that you configured the polling for, all right, is automatically triggered. Okay. Now, before you configure the trigger, right, the first thing, of course, you have to do is to enable it from here. So you enable this GitHub hook trigger for Git SCM polling. So you click on that. Now, once you have clicked here, you have to go to your GitHub account to configure, all right, the integration, basically. Let's use that word, integration, okay? But before you go to your GitHub account, you have to come back to your instance page, all right? Click on security, and then you need to check something, right? Now, here, right, now look at this. This configuration right here would not allow the polling, right, to function because I have restricted access to my Jenkins server to my IP address. That means my GitHub is not able to connect, all right, to my Jenkins server, right? Because my GitHub repo is not hosted within this IP address, right? It's something that is hosted externally. Okay, so if I have this configuration and I go to my GitHub account and configure the webhook, then this is not going to work. So what do I do? All right, what I need to do now is to open up my security group. All right, open up your security group and edit your inbound rule. All right, and then you can delete this, add a new rule. All right, and then this will be 8080. The purpose of this is to allow GitHub to connect to Jenkins. So open it up to everyone and then save the rule. Okay, now that is done. So the next thing we need to do now is to come here, take the public IP address of your Jenkins server, come to your repo. Now we're going to be using this repository. All right, we're going to be using this repo. Now, within this repository, every repository has, a settings, right? So click on settings, and then if you scroll down here, you find webhooks. All right. So click on webhook, and here I'm going to edit what I have here. All right. So it's asking me to authenticate. So I'm going to authenticate with my mobile. So I have my GitHub mobile app as well, so I can authenticate from my phone. So that's what it's asking me to do. So let's see. Okay. Yeah, Leko, I'm going to take a question. All right, let me just complete the webhook part, and I will take your question. Okay. I need to authenticate. If not, I won't be able to. Okay. It's not popping up anything here. Okay. It's not bringing anything. Let me just use my password. All right. So here, I'm just going to replace this IP, all right, with the IP address of my Jenkins server. So that's the new IP of my Jenkins. So this is how you configure your webhook. All right, HTTP, all right, the URL of your Jenkins server / GitHub-webhook, and then the / again, right? And then here, the content type is going to be application/JSON, all right? And then which event would you like to trigger this webhook, right? Push events, which means anytime I push anything to this repo, all right, the pipeline should be triggered, right? So you update the webhook. Now, if all the configuration, if everything is fine, all right, you can click on recent deliveries, all right, so you don't have anything here, so which means the webhook has not been triggered just yet. So if you click on webhooks again, all right, this gray icon, all right, should actually turn to, a green check mark, all right, it should turn to a green check mark, but of course, we can wait, click on recent deliveries, nothing has been triggered yet. All right, so just leave it as is. All right, hopefully we get to turn this to green as we go on. Okay, so here, check this, make sure this is checked, and then scroll down. Now, under the pipeline, all right, we are not going to be copying and then pasting our pipeline script here. We're not going to do that, right? So I'm going to click and then I'm going to say pipeline script from SCM. So let me select that. Let me hold on. All right, there. So let's hear what Lakon has for us. So Lakon, please go ahead.
Good evening.
Yeah, please go ahead,
Yeah,
sir.
my question is, while I was trying to install my Jenkins over the weekdays, I was having issue with the inbound rule and the outbound rule. Whenever I put the inbound rule, which we have to set to my private IP, from when I was configuring it, it was telling me if I should make it open, if I should use 000 and everything, it might be exposed for to being hacked or something. So I had to use my private IP, which I selected during the configuration. Then I find out that the Jenkins is not connecting whenever I use the IP dot 8080. Is not the the login, which is the login dashboard, is not coming out. So I had to use the IP, which is the custom IP. Then I change, the custom IP, then 800 800. Then I use a custom TCP, then 800, which is the port. Then I wanted to use the IP. So now my question now, because I do it over and over. At some point I got it, but I don't know which I used. So now if I want to ask the question is, which IP would you recommend when you are setting up the Jenkins? And I just realized you changed the IP to 0000. Should we use that as the standard so that we don't need to go and change the IP again to another one while connecting to webbook? Because I realized you change everything to 000 just now. That's what I was asking. Like, do we use 00 all through so we will save the headache? Then when it generate the other IP, we can use the other IP to log into the Jenkins dashboard. Hope you understand my question, sir.
Yeah, very clearly. All right. Yeah. So I wanted you to conclude your thoughts before and responding. Okay. Now, one thing we must understand about the security group is that number one, the security group is a firewall that is regarded as a stateful firewall. Now, stateful then means that what is really important is the inbound, all right, what you want to allow in, all right, to your platform. Okay, so the inbound is very, very important. Now, when you talk about restricting access, so let me go to the inbound, edit inbound. Now here, you have your type, which is the port or the protocol you want to allow, and then the source. So the source can be your IP, it can be anywhere, right? Now, if you do not have a public IP that was assigned to you by your ISP, right? This option, if you come here, for example, and you say, let's say, just for example, port 90, and then you say my IP. Now, this IP that you see here, it's a publicly accessible IP that was assigned by my own ISP. All right, which means this IP address is routable on the internet. All right. Now, for some of us, if, for example, if you're using, maybe you're using maybe this Airtel 4G modem, MTN 4G modem, or you're even using your phone hotspot, right? Now, this option is not going to work for you because whatever IP address your Airtel 4G, MTN 4G, Glo 4G is giving to you is actually a shared IP, which means that IP is not dedicated to you alone. All right. So even if you go there and then it gives you an IP address and all of that, that IP is not routable on the internet. Okay. Now we have what is called private IP. There's public IP addresses. All right. Now this IP that you see here, it's a public IP. Now there are private IPs that have been NATed as well, which if you're using it within your organization, right, you can still browse the internet. But that IP address that is assigned to your system is not accessible from the internet. Okay. So if what you're using is Airtel 4G, MTN 4G, all these, MiFi and, Wi-Fi boxes and all of that, right? You would not be able to set this option of my IP, right? Except you have a dedicated IP address assigned by your ISP. All right. So that is number one. Okay. Now, this 00, of course, is not best practice, right? Because what 00 means is, all right, any IP address from anywhere can access your resource. That's what it means, right? Now, it is not best practice, okay? Because normally within an organization, you have to, all right, be able to restrict access to your resources. Okay, now for the purpose of our own learning, that is why I had to change this one here to 00, because there's no way I can allow connection between my GitHub and my Jenkins if GitHub is not able, all right, to interact with my Jenkins server. Because don't forget, GitHub is not something that I hosted myself, right? I didn't host it. It's something that is public, right? It's available for everybody to use, right? Now, if I hosted my own repo, for example, if you're using Bitbucket within your organization, now you can host your own repository using Bitbucket, right? Now, if you host it yourself, of course, that Bitbucket will have an IP. So your Jenkins can be tied to that IP address. So that means you don't have to expose your repo. But in our own case, we're using a publicly accessible repository that is not within our jurisdiction, is not a repo that we hosted ourselves. Okay, so the only way for Jenkins and GitHub to interact is to make it, all right, is to open it up so that GitHub can interact with Jenkins. If you do not do that and we restrict it to a particular IP address, then GitHub is not able to interact with our Jenkins server. All right, so that is why we had to open it up to everybody so that GitHub can also interact with, all right, our Jenkins server. But of course, the 000 thing is not recommended. In a production environment, you would at least see, right, your security group being opened up to everybody. All right, it's not best practice. So, but then what we are trying to do here is basically to allow, all right, GitHub and then to communicate with Jenkins so that anytime we push anything into that repository, GitHub should trigger, all right, our Jenkins server. Hey, there's a job for you that you need to work on. All right, and that's the purpose of what we're doing here. All right, have I clarified your doubt?
Yeah, sure, 100%. Because I knew I did it later, but I don't know what I did, but I got it. So I can't go back. So when you came to this security group, that's why I said I should ask this question, but you've answered it very correct.
Okay. All right.
Thank you.
You're welcome, sir. Any question? Any other question before we go on? Any other question? Oh, do we have any other question? Is somebody asking a question? Okay. Yeah, Shay, you can unmute yourself and ask a question.
Right, so instead of using a pipeline, so can we use, a freestyle for this project? Because let me see, maybe I'm just trying to think ahead. I'm just looking at the project, and I think, will a freestyle work?
Yeah, a freestyle is too basic, right? It won't work for what you want to achieve, right? It's too
Okay,
basic, so it's not going to work, right? So what you use mostly in production is a pipeline, you know, the
okay,
pipeline, what do you call it now? The pipeline job. That's what you use, right? The freestyle is just to test out a few things. Maybe you're just practicing something. But when you really, because when you talk about a job, all right, in Jenkins, it is in stages, right? Now, with a freestyle, you cannot configure stages using a freestyle job, all right? You can only execute commands in parallel, right? But in pipeline, you can actually configure stages, which means the first stage can be pull something from GitHub. The second stage can be copy that thing to an EC2 instance. The third stage can be execute that thing you've copied on EC2 instance, all right? So you can configure stages, and all the stages would, all right, they will run sequentially, which means one at a time, right? You don't have that flexibility with a freestyle project, all right? So that's why I said it is too basic, right? When you're talking about, running a pipeline. Is that okay?
okay. On the issue of stages, because I was I was working based on the material on the, what's it called, on the learning path, and then so a Docker file was being used, and then I just walked through that, and though I'm learning, Docker by the side, so I maybe I understand few things. So after I ran the job, it worked, and then it tied to, let's say, a particular path. And then I wanted to change it to something different. You understand? So, but because it is tied to that port, so I don't know how to explain that, but what I'm trying to say is this. Is it possible to skip a stage? For instance, now, if you have a particular stage, you ask it to do something, and then the next time you want to run that pipeline, is it possible to skip a particular stage, or it must follow that sequence every time
Mm.
that job is being run?
Well, I think the simplest way to skip a stage is to comment that part out. All right. You can just comment it out so that the next time you run that pipeline, of course, it sees it as a comment and then it just bypasses that and then just goes ahead and run the other stages. All right. So that's the easiest way to bypass that. So just comment out, that particular stage that you don't want to run, and then Jenkins will ignore that. All right, and move on to the next thing.
All right.
Yeah. Okay. So let's take Howard. You can unmute your mic and ask your question. Okay. Howard, if you can hear me, you can unmute your mic and ask a question. Okay. Let's wait for him then. So Raymond, yes, you can go ahead. You can unmute your mic and ask a question.
Yeah, thank you very much. So I was actually talking about the webhook.
Hmm.
I saw what you pointed out concerning one of the reasons why the webhook did not work. Is there other reasons why it couldn't or it may not work? Because for me, I've been trying it for some time now, and all of a sudden, it's just not connecting. So where you saw the gray, should I say, button or point, I saw like a triangle and an exclamation mark inside a triangle. That's what I saw there. So it should like an error sign. So is there another way or what you think I did wrong that I could
Yeah.
fix?
Yeah, sometimes when you see that triangle, it doesn't mean that your webbook is not working, right? It just means the synchronization has not happened yet. All right. For example, if you look at what we have here, we have these, just gray mark here,
Yeah,
which says
yeah,
the pipeline has not been triggered. All right. So until we push to this repository now, we may not be able to, conclude whether it's working or not. All right. It's when you push that but one thing you must understand is your IP address must be correct, and your instance, just like what we have done now, all right,
yeah,
must allow, everyone to access your 8080 port, which is your Jenkins port, right? So if you have configured all of these, and then
yeah.
you've also gone to your pipeline to enable, all right, this option for this
Mhm.
particular project, all right, then I think you should be able to, it should work. All right, we're going to look at that together. All right, we're
Okay,
going to look at that together. Okay.
thank you.
So, um, all right. So, Howard, if you can hear me, you can go ahead and ask a question. If you can hear me, or you may want to check your mic if you're having issues with your mic. All right. So let's go on. So webbook has been configured. All right, and then we also have, this one checked. Now here, under the pipeline session, we say pipeline from SCM, which is basically the pipeline should come, all right, from source code management, all right, which is your GitHub account, all right, or your GitHub repository. So what's the SCM that we're using? So here you're going to say Git, all right, and here you have to specify your repository URL, all right. If your repo is a private repo, then you have to configure credentials and all of that, but the repository we're using is a public repo, so we don't need to configure, all right, any credentials. So I'm going to go back here to code, all right, and I'm going to come here and I'm going to use the HTTPS option. So copy that and then drop it right here. All right. So it's a public repo, so it doesn't need a credential. Now, in that repo, all right, you have to specify the branch. So if you look at the branch name is Jenkins. All right. So here you have to change the name, not master now. It is what? Jenkins. So you have to use the correct branch name. All right, so the branch name is Jenkins. So that's what you're going to have here. So what Jenkins will do is that it's going to look, all right, into this repo, and then it's going to look at this branch called Jenkins. All right. And if you scroll down, there should be a file in that repository that is called Jenkins file. All right. That is called what? Jenkins file. Because what Jenkins will do is that it will connect to that repo and then search that repository for a Jenkins file, because that Jenkins file is your pipeline, all right, script that Jenkins is going to use to build your pipeline, all right? So the Jenkins file contains instruction that Jenkins will use to build, all right, your pipeline, okay? So you have to make sure it is, all right, there's a file in your repo that is called Jenkins file. And if you look at this place, we have, all right, a file here called Jenkins file. Now, if you look at this Jenkins file, the J is capital, right? Your J is not small letters, okay? So let's take note of that. The J is capital, and then the rest is, all right, basically lowercase, okay? So let's take note of that. So let's click on save. Let's save that. Okay, all right. So now if you look at what we have here, all right, if you look at what we have here, we have our Jenkins pipeline, all right? So these are jobs, right? But then there's no build history just yet. Now we have the Git ubu log, all right? So if you click on the Git ubu log, it will show you, all right, all the triggers that has happened. But of course, we don't have any one yet, right? We don't have any log just yet. So it's not going to show us, all right, anything, but you can take a look at that as well. Now, we have done the first part. All right, we need to do, all right, the second, all right, path. All right, so we need to work on the second path. And of course, if you see there's nothing yet, not polling has run yet, so which means no push event has happened just yet. All right, now here you have different options, right? There's status, there's changes, there's build now, configure, delete pipeline, pipeline syntax, and all of that, right? So let's click on status. Let's go back to status. All right, so here you have the stage view. Okay, now normally what we should do straight away now is to just say build now. Okay, because build now will mean that we have already connected, all right, our repo to this job. Okay, and we've also given it, the file path, which is the Jenkins file. Okay, but of course we have to look at the script first of all and understand what the script is going to do, all right, for us. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring up the Jenkins file, all right, and we're going to take a look at the Jenkins file together to understand exactly, all right, what the Jenkins file is going to do for us, and basically what the Jenkins file is going to achieve, all right, within our system. All right, so I'm going to bring up the Jenkins file, all right, so that we can look at it together and understand exactly what that Jenkins file is going to do, all right, for us. Okay, so let's take a look at the Jenkins file together. All right, so let me share my screen so that we can see this. All right. All right. Now, this is, all right, an example Jenkins file, and this is the Jenkins file we are going, all right, to be using. Now, let's take a look at this pipeline together. All right, now I talked about commenting out something if you don't want it to, all right, do the job for you or something. So yeah, if I want to comment out this path, all right, I can actually come right here and do this, right? / and then, all right. So what I just did is basically, all right, commenting out this particular job. Okay. So if I push this to my repository, then this job is not going to, all right, it's not going to execute. This stage is not going to execute, right? It's only going to execute this first stage. Okay. Now let's take a look at this file, all right, together. Now this is a Jenkins file, all right, a Jenkins pipeline configuration. The first thing you declare in your pipeline script is what? The keyword pipeline. All right. And then you have to open up a curly brace. All right. And of course, the curly brace has to end at this point. All right. There has to be a closing. So when you open a curly brace, there has to be the closing curly brace. All right. Now, the next thing you configure is agent. So here we're saying the agent is any, right? Because with Jenkins, you can actually run your Jenkins job on, another server. For example, if you have another server, that server can serve as your build server, right? And that tells you that Jenkins supports what is called, client server kind of configuration, right? Where you can have a Jenkins server as the master node, and then you can have other client nodes where you can build your job. So here we are basically saying that this pipeline can run on any agent, including the Jenkins server itself. Okay, so you have to specify that. Now here you have environment. Basically, this is used to set environmental variables. All right, If you have any environmental variables you want to set, and of course, the purpose of setting a variable is that you do not want to add code, all right, any values, right? You don't want to add code any value, all right? You want to use variables instead, so that if you want to change the values later on, you just go to where you declare the variable and then change the value. And of course, if you run your job again, all right, the job will take on the new value that you've specified. So here is where you specify your environmental variable, right? Now we've not set up our Jenkins, all right, our EC2 instance yet that we're going to use. We've not done that just yet, okay? But of course, we're going to change this IP address later on, okay? Now, the next thing you configure in Jenkins is stages, which is where you now define the stages, all right, how the job will be executed. So what's the first thing you want to do? Right? What's the next thing you want to do, right? How do you want your job to go? All right. Now, of course, we have other complex, all right, Jenkins pipeline, right? This is just a very simple one that we can understand and relate with, all right? There are other ones that are very complex, okay? So here you have stages, right? Now, you can see that from this point, everything that you configure after the pipeline is actually under, all right, the curly brace of your pipeline. So agent is under the pipeline. Environment is under the pipeline. Stages is also under the pipeline. And you see that. Now, for everything that you configure, you can see that each of them, they have their own open and closed curly brace, right? So the environment has its own curly brace, and then it closed right here. So this is more like a block, okay? Now, for stages, you have the curly brace opened up, and then under stages, you now have what you call stage. Because in Jenkins, all right, in some cases, you have more, all right, than one stage. All right, sometimes you have 3 stages, you have 2 stages, sometimes you even have 6 stages, right? Depending on even 7 stages sometimes, depending on what, all right, job you're trying to build. Okay. So here you have stages, and then under that you have stage, all right, which is the first stage now. And here you have the name of that stage. Now, this name can be anything. It can be fetch, it can be pull, whatever name, right? This is not anything hard coded, right? It's just a name for that stage, right? Basically an identity, all right, for that stage, okay? And then for that also, you open up a curly brace for that. And then within that, you now have what is called steps. Now, what the step basically is what you want to execute, right? What are the steps, or what are the commands that you want to run? Now, after that, you now have script. So you can see that for every of these things, there's an open and close curly brace. So this one opens here and closes here. This one opens here and closes here. Okay, so you have to be mindful, all right, of these curly braces. Okay, so the steps right here, you open another curly brace, you have the script, another curly brace, and then here, you're just echoing out something. So this echo is going to appear in your pipeline, all right, log. So here we say pull web script from GitHub. So that's what we're doing. And then the command is git branch, all right? This is the command we want to execute now. So this is what we're executing at this stage. So basically, we want Jenkins to connect, all right, to our GitHub, okay, and then pull, all right, this repository. So basically what we're saying is that we want to clone, all right, this repo. So instead of saying git clone, all right, this is what we say here. Git branch, the branch name is Jenkins, and this is the URL, which means connect to this URL and then find the branch called Jenkins and clone whatever it is that you have there on the Jenkins server. All right? That is exactly what we're seeing here. All right? Now, this stage may not be necessary, okay? Because we already have given Jenkins the URL of our repository and the branch that Jenkins should look for to get, all right, the Jenkins file. So this stage may not be necessary anymore, all right? Because already Jenkins has been connected to our Git repository. We have specified the name of the URL of the repo and then the branch as well. So this right here may not, all right, be necessary. Okay, it's just like repeating what we have done already with the pipeline. Okay, but I just thought to show us this, all right? Because this will be useful if you are, right? If you, maybe your Jenkins job is not, the Jenkins file that you have perhaps is not in the same repo, right, that you specify in that Jenkins job, okay? But if what we have configured is the way we want to go, then this stage is no longer, all right, necessary, okay? But this is a way to clone this repo, all right, on your Jenkins server. And then the next stage can actually take whatever it is that you have here and then copy that to wherever, maybe an EC2 instance or anywhere that you want, all right, these to run, okay? So let's take a few questions from here before we go. Okay, all right. Yeah, so later on, you can unmute your mic and ask a question.
Yeah. My question is, we are taking Jenkins is taking a branch from the GitHub. So now the question is, which of the branch? But sometimes we commit about 2, 3, 4 branches. Sometimes it might be master branch, it might be branch for a developer. So which of the branch are we using Jenkins to create the URL? Hope you understand the question.
Yeah, so now if you're dealing with a multi-branch, if you have a repo that has different branches, okay? Now, whichever branch that you are using, all right, in your Jenkins pipeline must contain, all right, the Jenkins file, okay? So now let me take you back to our pipeline configuration, all right? So these are pipeline. If I click on configure, all right, I can check the configuration that we did, all right, for this particular pipeline, all right? So if I go to that configure, let's see what we have right there. Right? Now, if you scroll down, all right, here, we already specified the URL of the Git repo. And here we also specified the branch, Jenkins. Now, what Jenkins will do is that it's going to look into this repo, all right, and then it's going to specifically look into this branch. And in this branch, it's going to look for, all right, this particular file. So if it finds this file, whatever instruction that you have written, whatever you have declared in this file is what Jenkins will use, all right, to build, all right, your pipeline or to create your pipeline, right? Because Jenkins is going to work with whatever has been declared in this file, right? This is what Jenkins understands, right? So it's going to find Jenkins file in this branch. If it sees the Jenkins file in that branch, whatever it is that you've declared there, if the syntax and everything is correct, then it's going to build your pipeline or build your job based on the instruction that you're specified in this file. All right. So that's how Jenkins works. Has that cleared your question?
Okay. Yeah, thank you.
Okay. All right. So let's take, yeah, Sean, please go ahead.
Hello, good afternoon, sir.
Oh, there's noise coming from that place. If you can tune down the sound so that we can hear you clearly.
Okay, now. Is it better now?
Yeah, I think we can
Hello?
manage this. Yeah, we can manage this. It's
Okay,
okay.
so thank you so much. I just want to note that this is my first class. This is the first time I'm joining this, so I don't know whether we are just configuring the Jenkins or what we are doing so that I can catch up.
Oh, okay. I would advise that you take advantage of the recording so you can log in into your portal and then find the recording of previous classes. I think this is just about the second class, if I'm correct. All right. So you can log in into your portal and then get the video for the last class. So that way you can, all right, catch up and understand exactly, what we have done up to this point. Is that okay?
Okay. Yeah, that's okay.
Yeah.
Thank you.
All right. You're welcome. Thank you, sir. All right. Okay. So, all right. So we have somebody else who's in their hand. Okay. All right. Finny, please go ahead. If you can hear me, Finn, you have your hands raised up. You can go ahead and ask your question. Okay. You can also put it in the chat if you're having issues with your mic. All right, but your mic has been allowed, so you can go ahead and ask your question. Okay, let me just check the chat if there's anything in the chat. Yeah, yeah. So Funshaw, yes, I'm going to share the screen with you. I'm going to share the repo with you. I'm going to send the repo URL with us, all right, so that you can also go there and maybe clone the repo or whatever you want to do with it. All right, yes, the repo is actually public, so you can actually take a look at it and then use that for your own practice as well. Okay. Yeah. So Finn, if you can hear me, I can hear what you're saying. All right. But your mic has been allowed. But if you're having issues, you can also drop your question in the chat so that I can read it out and then answer your question. Okay. Do you need previous knowledge of Docker for this current project? All right. Now, what we are doing currently, we're not using Jenkins to build, all right, a Docker image. All right. We're not using Jenkins to do that. All right. So in the course of the class, we're going to be touching on, I think we are going to touch on Docker. I'm not sure now. All right. But what we're doing now, we're not even dealing with Docker at all, right? We're just using Jenkins to deploy a simple web script, all right, to our EC2 instance. So the deployment is going to happen between Jenkins and an EC2 instance, right? So we're not building any Docker image, all right, with Jenkins, okay? But of course, you can build a Docker image with Jenkins as well, all right, and push that to maybe your ECR repo or your Docker Hub, all right, as well. But yes, even if you don't have Docker knowledge, right, you don't need that, all right, for this particular project, okay? Have I answered your question? All right. Now for the attendance, I think you can check your Slack channel. All right. You can check your Slack channel if the attendance is there. But maybe Sandra can also help us drop the link here as well. Right. If Sandra can hear me, you can also drop the attendance link right here as well so that people can feel the attendance. But you can also check your Slack channel if the attendance has been dropped there as well. Okay. All right. So let's go on with what we're doing. All right. All right. So let me just save this again. All right, so let's go back to that script, okay? So like I said, for what we're trying to do, we don't need this path, all right, again. Now, another thing that I quickly would do, all right, is to check this particular script that I have. I want to check if it is something that I got from my, I'm trying to check this. Okay. All right, now, this is what I'm going to do, okay, so that we can understand these things very clearly. Okay, I'm going to close this and I'm going to go to my terminal. All right, and I'm going to go to my desktop. All right, I hope you can see my screen clearly. And here I'm going to say git clone. Right, I already have my repo, so I'm going to clone that using the HTTPS. Right, now copy that and then drop the link here. All right, so I'm cloning that repository. All right, on my server. Right, now the repository has been cloned. Right, I'm going to say cd. The name of the repo is Jenkins. Not this Jenkins. Jenkins underscore deploy. All right, I underscore EC2. So I'm going to open that up. Okay, and I can do something like this. I can say cat.git slash config. Now, what that would show me is to show me, all right, the URL of my repo and to confirm that this, all right, is the Git repository. Okay, this is not the Git class, all right? But I'm just trying to confirm, all right, the URL and every other thing that I need to confirm, all right? Now, here, in order for me to work with this script, all right, and to maybe make some modifications and push, all right, to my Git repository, I need to confirm and do a few things, all right? So now I'm going to come here and I'm going to say code dot. Now, what do you think this will do, right? Basically, the code dot is going to open up this folder in my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so if I say code dot, this, all right, Jenkins deploy EC2 folder that I just cloned now, this code dot is going to open up this folder, right, in my GitHub, sorry, in my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so let's open that up in our Visual Studio Code, right? Can you see that? So that is opening up in my Visual Studio Code. Okay, so here now I have my Jenkins file, right? This is my complete, all right, Jenkins file and the EC2 file, okay? But what I want to do is I have to configure my, what is it called now? My GitHub repo, all right, to use my SSH key so that I can push from here, all right, to my, all right, my GitHub repo. Okay, so I have to configure my SSH key, right? Now, the first thing I need to do is, okay, just a minute. All right. Okay, so the first thing I need to do is to configure my SSH agent, all right? That's the first thing I need to configure, okay? So there's this code here that I'm going to use, all right? So eval, now this is something you can get, all right, in the GitHub SSH documentation page, right? You can get this from that, page, okay? All right, so I'm going to run this. Basically, what I'm doing with this is I am starting up my SSH agent. Now, in addition to that, like I said, it's not a Git class, all right? So I won't be explaining some of this, all right? I assume that at the advanced level, you already know how to work with your Git repository, okay? Now, my SSH key already is on my system, right? So there's the SSH ID. So because I generated the key on my own system, right? So I am adding that key, all right, to my SSH agent. So basically what I'm doing is I want to work with this repository using this SSH key, all right? So I'm going to press enter. Now, if you look at that, he identified that the key belongs to this person, and this is the email address of my GitHub repository, okay? Now, I'm going to clear my screen, and I'm going to do this, all right, git, all right, configure, git config, global, and I'm going to set my username, all right? So the username of my repo is this, all right? And I'm going to set my email address, all right? Now, the purpose of this is for tracking, all right? Your Git commit is going to need those details, okay? Now, I have configured my Git repo, right? So now, let's try out something. So let me comment out this path, okay? So / asterisk, and then asterisk, and then the backslash, all right? So now I have made a few changes, right? Already I explained this path to us, right? So now let me push, all right, to my repo. So what do? I've made a change, and already it tells me that the Jenkins file has been what? Has been modified, right? Now I will say git add, okay? And then your git commit, -m to pass your message. And then we're going to say, all right, Jenkins integration in progress. Now, the commit must be a message that makes sense, okay? But I'm just using this, Jenkins integration in progress, right? The commit message must be something that will tell your colleagues or anybody that is looking at your repo, all right, as to what you're trying to achieve, right? So commit that and then say git push, all right, to push to your repository. Okay, so now I have pushed to the repo. Okay, so let us find out, all right, from our Jenkins pipeline if the, look at that, the trigger happened. Can you see that? Can you see that? So if you go to your repo and you go to settings, all right, and you go to webhook, all right, can you see the green check mark? It says the last delivery was what? Was successful. So the pipeline was actually triggered, right? And if you look at that, the pipeline was triggered, and then look at the stage view, right? The fetch code, the view was what? Was successful. So you can see this green check mark. It tells you that what? The pipeline is successful. Now, what did we do, right? We only cloned the Git repo, right? Now, if you look at what we have here, the only thing we did was to what? Was just to say, oh, Jenkins, this is the pipeline that I want you to use, right? And we pushed the changes to the repo, all right? And then the trigger, all right, happened, and then the job was built automatically. So we didn't have to build the job manually, all right? And that's one of the beauty of, DevOps, automating things as much as you can, all right? So that's what we've done, okay? Now here we can see that the pipeline was triggered. So if I click on GitHub logs, right, I would see, all right, the log, the delivery, all right, what has happened, all right, so far. So let's take a look at that. All right, so look at that. It says it started at so time. They started by the event. All right, started by event from 140 whatever. All right, this is we don't have. I don't think this URL does not belong to us. All right, it's basically saying that the event came from this place. All right, and then it triggered. All right, the webhook. Okay, and it says changes were found, and so because changes were found, all right, the pipeline was triggered. All right, can you see that? So now if you go back to status, you can see the job that you built. Now, we've not done anything, right? The only thing we've done is to clone the repo, right? We've not even connected to our EC2 instance at all. We've just cloned, all right, the repo. But let's take a few questions, all right, before we go, all right, any further. Okay. Yeah, so Shion, let's have your question. Shion, you can unmute your mic.
No, we just can't see. We can't see anything that you're displaying. Is a blank screen on our side. You can see the chart.
Oh my goodness. Oh my God. Sorry about that. I guess it was when oh, so sorry. Oh my goodness. Oh my God, I was talking to myself about this one. Apologies, please. All right, apologies. Okay, so, all right, you can see my screen clearly now, right?
Yes, it's clear now.
All right, apologies for that. Okay, I apologize. All right. Oh wow. Okay, so let me just recap. All right. So what I did, this is a script. So we commented out this path. All right, we're still going here. And this first stage is what we dealt with, right? So here we have the stages, and then basically what we're doing is to connect Jenkins to our Git repo to pull or to clone, all right, whatever it is that we have, all right, in this repository, and basically this branch, okay? And so what we did was to now, all right, we did a few commands, git add, git commit, and then we pushed, all right, to that repository. Now remember that before now, we already configured the webhook, right? So what we did after we pushed was that we discovered that automatically the pipeline was triggered. We didn't even trigger it. All right, the pipeline was triggered. And if you look at the webhook settings, you can see that it says the last delivery was successful. All right, so if I click on this now, all right, and I go to recent deliveries, right, I can see that yes, it was successful, right? There was a push that was successful, and that automatically triggered, all right, the pipeline. Okay, so if you click on GitHub GitHub hook log, okay, you're going to see, all right, the log, all right, for your GitHub polling. Okay, so let's take a look at that. All right, so you can see it says here that changes was found, and that was what led to the, the triggering of the pipeline. Okay, and it says started on so date, and the event was started from this IP, all right, and that triggered the webhook, all right, and then the job was built. So the first job was built, and if you look at the stage view, all right, it gives you an idea of what happened. All right. I don't know why this URL is so slow. Okay. So look at that. So the fetch code happened, and it says declarative checkout SCM. Okay. Now, if you want to check the logs of this job, right, you can actually, and if you look at the average runtime, it says this job was, ran less than 8 seconds, right? Everything took less than 8 seconds. Okay. So if you click on this build number right here, if you click on that, all right. If you click on that, if you click on console outputs, now the console output is going to show you, all right, what happened, all right, how the job was built, what, took place and all of that, right? So let's click on console output and let's see what that looks like. I don't know, maybe it's because I'm using a T2 micro. That's why this is so slow. Maybe we should increase the instance size. All right, but increasing the instance size will take us outside of the free tier. All right, so maybe we should try that and see if it works, right? Because this is, I'm sure the network is not slow, because if I refresh this page, right, this is coming up very fast, right? But then this one is very slow. So I'm thinking it's because the instance size is small, right? Maybe it's taking time to process all the jobs, all right? So we may have to increase the instance size later on, but let's just go on with what we have. Now, if you look at what you find here, it started by GitHub push, all right, by this person. So this person pushed to the repo, and then the job was started because of that push event. It says obtained Jenkins file from Git, all right, from this repository, which means if the Jenkins file was not present in this repo, the job would not have succeeded. Okay, so here it says obtained Jenkins file. Now, it says the Jenkins file, all right, the job in the Jenkins file is now what? Being executed on this Jenkins server. Okay, and then what Jenkins does is that for every job that you create, there is a folder in Jenkins that is called workspace, right? What Jenkins does is that your job, this Jenkins pipeline job, all right, Jenkins creates a folder, all right, for each job that you create. So inside of this folder, whatever you have in this repo is cloned inside of this folder. Okay, whatever it is that you have in this repository is cloned inside of this folder, right? And that folder is the name of your job. So for every pipeline job that you create, Jenkins creates a folder for each job in the workspace directory. All right, so here you can see the absolute path, which means if I log in into my Jenkins server right now and I navigate to this path, I would see this folder, and then the files that were cloned from here will be present in this folder. Now, another way to also see, all right, what was cloned into this folder is to scroll down right here, and then here you can see the workspace folder right here. Okay, so if you click on the workspace, you will see all of the files that are present in that repository, all right, will be available in that workspace directory. All right. So let that come up and let's see that. All right. So here, this is the workspace. Now, if you click on this workspace, all right, if you click on that URL, all right. Now look at that. You can see that the Jenkins file was cloned. The setup script also was cloned, right? So that tells you that if you log in also, if you SSH into your instance, you're going to find, all right, all of these files, right? Everything, you're going to find it there. Okay. Now, let's go back to our job. Okay. All right. So, Shayi, please go ahead. Oh, okay. All right. So now this slowness that we're experiencing, let us see if we can stop this instance and maybe change the instance type. Okay, maybe that would improve the performance. Okay, because this is dragging and is wasting our time. Okay, so I'm going to go to my instance. I'm going to stop this instance. All right, so let's increase the instance size to something, although that will take us outside of a free tier, but if it works, then I think that's a good one, right? So go to your instance, make sure the instance has stopped, right? So you can refresh the page again. It's still stopping. Let's wait for that a while. Let me refresh. All right. So the instance has stopped. So I'm going to go to Actions, Instance Settings, and I'm going to click on Change Instance Type. All right. And here, I'm going to cancel out T2 Micro. And let's go for T3 Small. All right. So T3 Small will give us 2 virtual CPUs and 2 gig of RAM. So I think that should do. Of course, the price is a bit higher, and it tells us here that if you change the T3 small, you will no longer be under the free tier, right? And then you'll be charged. So, but the charge is not going to be much, right? It's just going to be a few cents, and I believe we can still manage, all right, that. Okay. So let's apply. All right. So the instance type has been changed. So let's come back here again. And of course, the IP address is going to change, right? So let's note that the IP is going to change. That means you have to go back to your webbook and then replace the IP address with a new one. All right. So that's the implication. So let's start the Jenkins server again. I'm going to change all state here to running. All right. So the instance is started. So grab your public IP, go to your webbook page, click on settings. All right. And then change the IP address right here. All right. So change the IP and update the webbook. Right. So if you want to test it, you can click on recent deliveries. All right. And you can actually come here and say redeliver. All right. So be sure that everything is fine. So click on redeliver and say, yes, redeliver this payload. All right. So it's loading deliveries. All right. So if everything is fine, you can also see the green check mark. So that tells us that, yes, it was redelivered correctly. And all right, it is working as expected. Okay. Now here, I also have to change this IP. All right. The IP has changed. So let's put a new one. Of course, you're going to have to log in again. All right, but we want to just be sure that, if we change the instance type, that should improve the performance of the Jenkins server. So let's hope we're correct, all right? That is not a region thing, okay? Because the server is actually in the US East region. And so my region is quite far from that. So that can also impact the performance as well. But let's just hope that, changing the instance type will work for us. All right, so the instance type has changed. Okay, so let's see if the performance is going to be any different, right? All right, so while we are waiting for that, let's take a look at the script, all right, in order to deploy, all right, to an EC2 instance. So the first thing we want to do is to set up, all right. So the first thing we want to do is let's set up an EC2 instance, right? So launch instance, and let's call these, web server, right? So let's call it web server. So we're going to be using Ubuntu, right? And let's try Ubuntu 24. It's a new Ubuntu version, so let's give it a shot. And let's see if we can play around with it and see how interesting the new version is, right? 24.04, it's a new Ubuntu LTS version, right? It was released, I think, a few weeks ago. So let's stick with T2 Micro for that. Here, select your key pair. And under the network, click on Edit. All right, change this one to Enable. Select existing security group. Come here and choose your default security group. All right, choose default. For the volume, change this back to GP2, all right, so that you can still be under the free tier. And once you're done with all of that, you can launch your new instance. Okay, so now we have a new instance that we have launched. All right, so let's refresh. We only have the Jenkins server still running. All right, so we're preparing the ground. Now, I want to ask a question. We are trying to use Jenkins to deploy to this new EC2 instance. All right, can somebody help us? Right, what's the process going to be? Because normally when you have a new instance, the process is to do SSH, all right, and then you run your script or you type your configuration, whatever, right? Now that Jenkins is doing it for us, can somebody just, give us an idea, right? What are the steps? What steps do you think we need to do? What are the things you think we need to give to Jenkins that would allow Jenkins to do this job, all right, for us? Can somebody help us with that? Or what are the things you think, oh, Jenkins should have this and this and this in order to connect, all right, to this EC2 instance? Can anybody help us with what we need to do on our Jenkins server, all right, so that Jenkins can deploy to this web server? Can anybody help us with that? All right, you can raise your hand, you can put it in the chat. All right, yeah, so Sheyi, to answer your question, I use a Windows, right? I use a Windows machine, all right? That's what I use. I don't use Mac, all right? I use Windows. So if you have a very good Windows machine, I think, yeah, you can use a Windows. If you have a very good Windows in terms of compute resource, all right, you can actually use a Windows machine as well, okay? Instead of, if you don't have a MacBook, you don't have to worry about that. All right, now, yeah, so in the chat, I'm going to take your question, all right, Jemine, I'm going to take your question shortly, but let me just see what we have in the chat. I think we have some interesting response in the chat, so let me just quickly take a look at that, and then I'll come to you, Jemine, to take your contribution, all right? Yeah, so it says both machine, all what is saying, both machines have to be in the same subnet. Yes, that is correct. Yeah, so Olatubo, so the question is, we want to use Jenkins to deploy to this web server that we just created. So the question I'm asking is, what are those things, we need to configure on our Jenkins machine, right? What's the configuration going to be on the Jenkins server in order for Jenkins to be able to deploy something, all right, to this EC2 instance? So that's the question, all right, that I asked. So let's have Jemine answers. Yeah, so you can unmute your mic now, and then let's see your contribution.
Oh, okay. Good evening, everyone. It wasn't a question I had. I wanted to answer the question you asked. So,
Oh, okay. Go
for
ahead,
you to
please.
reach the web server, it needs to be able to SSH into it. So, you don't need to have the SSH key set up, or you configure SSH agent on the Jenkins server. So, whenever it's going to have to SSH into that machine, it's able to.
Mm-hmm. All right. So that's a good one. Thank you so much. All right. Thank you for that contribution. Okay. So let's hear from Olayinka as well. Yeah, Alain, you can unmute your mic and let's hear your views.
Okay, I was going to say something very similar to what was just said now. We have to go to settings and configure the new server, the Jenkins server. Especially, we have to grant it access, configuring the private key. And thereafter, if we want to pass anything across to that server, I think there are different ways we can do that. And one of them is we can do like a pull in Jenkins, and then we install something called I think is it config over SSH or something, and then we can be able to use SSH to connect to the new server after we are done with, if we want to transfer, for example, any file. So that's the, but first we need to configure that server, especially with access to be able to talk to Jenkins on the settings.
Hmm. All right. Thank you so much, guys. Thank you so much for those wonderful contributions. Yes, thank you. So that's exactly what we're going to do, right? The things that you guys have said is exactly what we're going to do. All right, so let's get to it. All right. Now, the first thing we're going to do is to go to the Jenkins server. Now, remember that I told you that everything in Jenkins depends on a plugin, right? So now, like you rightly said, Jenkins has to be able to SSH into our instance in order to deploy anything on it, right? So that tells you that the first thing you have to configure is an SSH agent plugin. That's the first thing we have to do, right? So I'm going to come back to dashboard, all right? So let's go to dashboard. Okay, oh, wow. It's okay. Just have to manage this Jenkins server. All right. So come to manage Jenkins. All right. So under manage Jenkins, let's go to plugins. All right. So, okay. So there's one update, which is for the Jenkins. So we can do that later. So let's click on available plugins. All right. So here, I'm going to search for SSH, all right, agent. Okay. So let's just type in SSH. Okay. So just scroll down to see if we can find. All right. So this is what we're looking for. All right. SSH agent. Okay. So click on that. Wow. Okay. So let's start again. SSH. All right. So scroll down and then select SSH agent. So select that and say install. All right. Okay, so the SSH agent is installing, so it's saying pending. So let's wait for this to give us that option that it has been downloaded successfully. Now, I guess maybe because of the size of the server that we're using, all right, maybe Jenkins needs a bigger server or something, right? So this may just be here forever. Okay, so but then we can refresh actually. So let's refresh and let's see what we have. Okay. Sometimes to enjoy the Jenkins server, you may have to use maybe a T3 medium server. All right, so you can see that if you didn't refresh, it's not going to tell us this, right? So now it's been successfully installed. Okay, now we have our SSH agent, right? Now let's go back to dashboard. All right, let's go back to dashboard. So let's go and let's click on our job. Right? So click on your job. All right, now on the job page, there's what is called pipeline syntax. Because this plugin that we just installed, we're going to need that plugin, all right, to pass in our SSH key, right, to the Jenkins pipeline script. Okay, because what we want to do is we want to SSH from Jenkins into our instance, right? And so Jenkins must know, all right, what key to use. Okay, so if you click on pipeline syntax, you can get an idea of how to use the plugin that we just, all right, installed. Okay, now this thing is so slow. So annoying. Now I'm going to open up my dashboard again. All right, I want to quickly show us something, because before you can actually get an example, you must have configured your SSH key. All right, that's the first thing you have to configure. So here I'm going to click on instances. This is my web server right here. So I'm going to scroll down, and the key pair that I'm using for this instance is this .io class key. Right, so that's the key pair I'm using. Now I will go to my terminal. All right, and then I'll come here and say cd dot dot, all right, slash keys, right? And that location is where I have my key stored, okay? So I'm going to navigate to that location, all right? And if I do ls, I can see that my key is right here. It's class-key.pen, right? So that's my key. So what do I want to do? I will say cat, all right, and then the name of the key to view, all right, my key, not this one. All right, I'll just say cat. I can copy the name right here. All right, so that's the key that I'm looking for, .pen. Okay, so cat is to open up that key. All right, so I'm going to come here, and then I would copy from this begin, all right, down to this point. All right, and then I will copy that key, right, go to my dashboard, click on manage Jenkins. All right, so now you have to scroll down, and then you click on credentials. So click on credentials. All right, so here click on system. All right, so here click on this one again, global credentials. Click on that again. All right, now we don't have any credentials yet, right? So here we're going to click on add credentials. So click on add credentials. All right, now the kind of credential that we have to configure, here you have to select, and then it's going to be SSH username with private key. That's the kind of credential. So click on that, and then the ID, all right, you can give this EC2-server. All right, that can be your ID. The description can be the same thing. So what's, if you want to connect to your server, right? It's an Ubuntu server. So what's the username? So the username is Ubuntu, right? You can get that from here. Your server, click on connect, SSH client, and then the username is right here. Okay, so the username is Ubuntu. Okay, so and that's what we have here. Now private key, click on enter directly, click on add, and then what you have copied, oops. So let's copy that again. All right, make sure there are no, all right, white spaces and all of that. So copy that again and then drop it here. Okay, so make sure everything is copied correctly. All right, so drop it here and then you click on create. Okay, now you have created your SSH key. So your SSH key is now available on Jenkins. Now with this key, Jenkins is now able to interact with your server. All right, but that's not all. Right, we have to point Jenkins in the right direction. Okay, and that is where this pipeline syntax comes into the picture. So click on pipeline syntax, and then here you have what is called snippet generator. The purpose of the snippet generator is that any plugin that you have within your system and you need an example of how to use such plugins, you can actually generate, all right, an example, kind of script that will show you how you can use, all right, that particular plugin. So in our own case, the plugin that we're looking for is SSH agent. So scroll down until you find this, right? Because we have installed the plugin, this is now available. So click on this SSH agent. So here you have to select your SSH key that you just configured, and then you click on generate pipeline script. Right, now this is how to use this plugin in your pipeline script. That means you must have a place in your pipeline script, one of the stages where you have SSH agent, open bracket, square bracket, the ID of the key that you're trying to use, which of course should already be in your Jenkins server. All right, you close all of that, open the curly brace, and then here you now have the commands that you want to execute that will leverage, all right, this key. Okay, so this is how to use that plugin. Now let's go to our script and let's see how we can pull this off. All right, so I'm going to just cover this. So here I'm going to uncomment this. All right, now, so we have another stage here. Don't forget the code has been cloned, so our Jenkins server, right? So the next stage is that what we have cloned, we want to deploy to EC2, right? And we have also configured our SSH credential on Jenkins, okay? So we have another stage here, and of course we have this echo and all of that. Now, this right here is a function in Jenkins. So when you see anything that starts with dev in Jenkins, it is what? A function. Now, what is this function doing? This is the name of the function. And this is the command that we are passing into this function, right? Which means this shell command is holding this particular configuration. So if you trigger this, all right, it executes this. Now, don't forget, when we clone this repo, inside of this repository, we have two files. One is Jenkins, all right, file, and the other one is websetup.sh. Now, this websetup.sh is what we want to execute on our EC2 instance. It's a shell script that we want Jenkins to run on our EC2 instance. Now, in order for Jenkins to run it, you put in, all right, bash before, all right, the script. Now, let me take you back to your shell scripting class, all right? Before you execute a shell script, what do you do before executing a shell script? What command do you have to run? Anybody? When you write a shell script, how do you execute a shell script? Anybody that wants to help us? How do you execute a shell script? All right, very good. Olatubosan, thank you so much. Yeah, so chmod plus X. All right, chmod plus X. That's actually the correct, all right, syntax. Thank you, guys. Chmod plus X. Now, in Jenkins, we cannot do chmod plus X. So how do we make the script executable so that Jenkins can run that script on our EC2 instance? And that is how you find this. So now we are saying bash dot, all right, then the name of the script. So which means we are telling Jenkins to use the batch interpreter, all right, to execute this particular file. So this batch interpreter here is what it was has replaced chmod plus x, because we can't do that here, all right? So, and the truth of the matter is we are copying the script onto our Ubuntu server, right? So there's no way to really say chmod plus x the script. So the best way to do it is to say bash dot the name of the script. So when Jenkins sees this, he's going to say, okay, you are telling me to use the bash interpreter, all right, to execute this particular script. And that's the same thing as saying chmod plus x before you run your script. Is that okay? All right. So let's go on and let's understand other things that we have here. All right. Now we have this function defined. Okay. Now the SSH agent block that we saw is what we have right here. Now we are going to change this, all right, to the name of our credentials, right? So if you go to the credentials, the name is what? EC2 server. So we're going to just copy this name, all right, and then replace that with this one, all right? EC2 server. That's the name of the key. Now we're using this key to do two things. The first thing we're using the key to do is that we're executing a shell command, all right, on our Ubuntu machine, on our Jenkins server. Don't forget, this script has been what? Downloaded, all right, on our Jenkins server. I showed us that earlier, right? Now, the first thing you do with your key is to take this script and copy it onto your Ubuntu machine. Is that okay? So the command to do that is to say sh. Sh means you want to run a shell command, right? That's what sh means. Now, sh, we're saying scp. scp is secure copy. So I'm copying something securely using SSH key, right? Now I have -o street host key checking equals to no. What does that mean? Now, when you log in into a new instance, all right, it gives you these, fingerprint something, and then it says yes or no, right? You have to say yes before you are able to log in, right? Now, let me show us that practically for some people who may not have seen that before or something. All right, let me do that and show us practically, right? Now, this is our new instance, right? Our web server instance, okay? So I'm going to click on connect, and I'm going to copy this example, right? Now, I'm going to go to my terminal, all right? And I'm going to drop that configuration, right? Now, if I press enter, okay, now look at this. It would give me this information, blah, blah, blah. Are you sure you want to continue? Da, 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 da. I have to say yes, right? Now, if I say yes, of course, it will allow me to connect to that instance, right? Now, this information that you see right here, right? If you do not specify this, street host key checking equals to no, right? It's going to ask this. Now, your Jenkins pipeline is not interactive, all right? So there's no way you can say no or yes within your Jenkins pipeline, because by default, your pipeline is not supposed to be interactive, all right? So in order to avoid any break in our pipeline, that is why we need this option. -o strict host checking equals to no, which means don't ask me this question. Just go ahead and connect to my instance and do the job that I want you to do. Is that okay? So that is the purpose of this line right here. Okay? Which means don't ask me whether I want to continue or not, right? I know what I'm doing. So your own job is to connect and deploy my script. That's what I want you to do. All right? So that is the purpose of this, because your pipeline is not interactive. So there's no way you can say yes or no. Okay? Now, we are taking the script, which is on our Jenkins server, and we are copying that, all right, to our Ubuntu machine. Don't forget, we already have our key specified. So we're going to be using this key to connect to the Ubuntu machine. And we are copying that script to /home/Ubuntu, which is the home directory of our Ubuntu user. All right. Of course, this IP address has to change. all right? But we can use a variable to do that. So we can say environment, all right? I think we saw this earlier, so let me see if that script is still here. All right, so we can say environment, and then we can say EC2 underscore IP equals, all right? So the IP address of our EC2 instance, let's get that. So this is the IP address of our web server, right? So copy that. And then you can put that right here. All right, so don't forget to put it in your apostrophe, right? Now we're going to copy this EC2 IP, copy that, scroll down. Instead of coding the value, right? So I'm going to replace this with, all right, the variable. So $sign and then your variable. All right. Now it has to be in curly braces. Okay. All right, something like this. Okay. So this one as well, I'm going to just copy this. So I don't want to add code the value, so that's why I'm using a variable, all right? And then drop it here. So it's going to use the IP address, all right? It's going to take the IP address from here. So instead of add coding, I'm using a variable. So if I want to change the IP address later on, I can just come here and change it, and then this configuration remains as is, okay? So copy the web setup script to my Ubuntu machine. So the username is this, the IP address is this, and this is the location where I want the script copied to, all right? The next thing here is running another shell script. Now the script is here. So the next thing we want to do now is to execute that script. So what we are doing now is to say SSH. So we want to log in into that instance. The same street host key checking equals to no. Ubuntu as the username, the IP address, and then execute this, all right, function. That means the script is already on the server. So we're now using SSH to what? To trigger that script's execution. That's what we're doing. Okay. Now, any question before we run this, before you push into the repo and then run this? Any questions? Any questions? Any questions before we run this? All right. Now, remember that the script we're even talking about, we've not even seen it. We don't even know what is in that script, right? So let me show you what you have in that script. Now, guys, I want you to take a look at this script, and I want you to tell me, what do you think the script is going to do? All right, this is a shell script, right? And this is an advanced class. So I assume that you already have an idea, all right, of shell scripting. So take a look at this, and I want, I want responses. What is the script going to do in our environment? Anybody? This is the script that I want to execute on our Ubuntu machine. So I want you to take a look at this script and tell me what the script is going to do. All right, let me close the terminal so that we can see it full screen. So let me reduce it a bit, all right, so that we can see exactly what we have here. So that's the first line. All right, so let's hear from Sheyi. So Sheyi, please go ahead.
Okay, so number one, so once it runs this, number one is going to update the Ubuntu server, and then next it will install wget. So I think that is and then it will install the unzip the Apache 2, and then so whatever any message blah blah blah, it should send it to null, which means that I think is I think that means that it won't display any information or something. And then it moves to number one, so it makes a directory, and after making the directory, and then yeah, which is temp slash web files, and then change directory, and then the next thing is it goes to, so the I mean the widget is to I think is to be able to access the URL. So it goes to the URL, that is the tooth plate, and then it downloads that barista underscore cafe dot zip, and then it unzips that. After it unzips that, so it copy, and then I think the -R, I've forgotten that, but it means that it will copy the content, I mean everything in that particular folder, and then it copies that to var /ww/html, and then from there it restarts the Apache, and I think the cleanup is to delete the temp. So whatever thing we have in the temp, so it removes, I mean the temp web file. I think that's what the script is doing.
Wow, that's a good rundown. Thank you so much. Thank you so much. All right, so exactly what Sheyi has described is what the script is going to do. All right, so since we have, Sheyi has broken it down for us. So let's go ahead and let's push this into the repo and let's see what Jenkins will do, all right, with what we have right here. So let's go ahead and push this, all right, to our repository. So basically, just do your git add, all right, and then do your git commit, all right, and then executing, or let's say installing Apache 2 on Ubuntu EC2, right, with or using Jenkins, right? And then let's push to the repo. All right, so we've pushed. Let's go to our pipeline. Let's see. The pipeline should be triggered automatically, right? So let's confirm that. Let's see if Jenkins got triggered. All right, let's view that. Now, remember that up to this point, we didn't log in into the Ubuntu machine at all, right? We didn't even log in to check. Oh, wow. So the pipeline was triggered and the job was started already. So can you see that? So deploy to EC2 is ongoing. So let's see if it fails or it succeeds. All right, so let's see that. Now, remember that we didn't even log into the Ubuntu machine. We just created the Ubuntu server, right? And we're using Jenkins to interact with it. We didn't even log in. We didn't do anything, all right? So Jenkins is doing the job for us. So Jenkins is logging in and doing what we would have done. All right. And that is exactly what Jenkins is doing. So can you see the pipeline succeeded? All right. There was no error. There was no, all right, any issue at all. So let's take a look at the log, right? So let's take a look at the console output. So let's see exactly what Jenkins did, all right, to our server. All right. So let's take a look at the logs and let's see what Jenkins has done, all right, to that machine. Apologies for this, dragging. I don't know what is going on with this server today. My internet is good, but I guess maybe the region I'm using is too far away. That's why I'm experiencing this latency. Okay, but that's okay. All right. So the console output is coming up. Let's see, all right, what went on. All right. So this is the console output. All right. Already we are familiar with these. All right. Getting the code and all of that. Okay. So if you scroll down, all right, this is the commit message. Sorry, this is the echo, all right, that we have from the pipeline. And then SSH agent. Can you see it says using credentials Ubuntu, and this is using that. And then looking for SSH implementation. So that key worked. All right. So and then Jenkins was able to use our private key, all right, to communicate with our EC2 instance. And then it says SSH agent started. Now, the first thing we specified here worked. So the script was copied to that instance. Now, look at that thing, warning, permanently added, blah, 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 blah. So now, if we didn't put this option here, it will have broken the pipeline at this point. because it will have waited for us to say yes. And we don't have that privilege to do that, right? So you can see that it just skipped that part, right? Because we already said we're not interested in that. The next thing is to what? Is to execute that script on our machine, right? So you can see that script, it was executing. Now that dev-null thing that Sheyi mentioned, right? That is why we are not seeing too many outputs, right? Because all of the results were passed into the dev-null. So we're not seeing too many outputs, right? I believe you know what dev-null is, all right, from the foundations class, from the Linux class, right? So here we can see that everything got executed. All right, this is when we were downloading the template and we're, all right, extracting. So this one is at the point of extracting that zip file. All right, I can see all of that, extracting the zip file. We restarted the Apache, we removed the temporary files. And of course, after the whole thing was done, all right, the SSH agent was stopped and then the job completed successfully. So what that means is that without logging into my instance, if I just grab the public IP and I put it here on my browser and press enter, my web page should show up right now. Can you see that? So I have a complete website, all right, courtesy of Jenkins. Now, this website, I didn't have to log in into my instance to do any configuration, right? I used my knowledge of shell scripting to put a script together. And then my knowledge of Jenkins, all right, is what I now use to deploy the script to that server. Which means if I have like maybe other servers as well, I could have done the same thing, all right, that I did right now. Okay, so now I have a fully functioning website without having to log in to that instance. So you can see that all of the things that you've learned, your Linux skills, your shell scripting knowledge, right? All of those things are actually connected. All right. Those skills are not, things that you use in isolation. Okay. So because I understand shell scripting, it was easy for me to put that script together and then use that script in conjunction with Jenkins to deploy a fully functioning website without interacting at all with my server physically. Jenkins did all of that for me. So now I have a website that is up and running. So let's assume that this is maybe somebody gave me this job and all of that. Now, the website is ready in a matter of how many minutes, right? That job probably completed in how many minutes? If you look at that, if you go to status, all right, you can see the number of minutes it took the job to complete, right? And now you have a fully functional website. So you can click on About, you can click on our menu. It takes you to the menu. You can see all the information right here. You can go to reviews to see the testimonials from people. All right, look at that. You can see the address, the contact message. You can click on reservation. All right, to book a reservation, right? So there's a reservation URL. So you can see everything functioning together. All right, courtesy of Jenkins. Now, the job took only 44 seconds. Can you see how fast that was? Just 44 seconds. And in 44 seconds, you have a fully functioning website. Can you see that? So now if you want to make a reservation, you can put your full name, your phone number, your date of birth, the time, number of people coming, and you submit. And your website is up and running, and then it's functioning. All right? So again, like I said, all of those skills that you've learned up to now, all right, you can actually use them together, just like we have done now. So Linux experience is important. Shell scripting is good, something to have. Jenkins is also very important. So with Jenkins, you can deploy shell script to your instances without even logging into the instance, right? Of course, we didn't log into our own instance, and now we have a fully functioning website. And don't forget, this instance is not the Jenkins server. It's actually another instance. But with our knowledge of all of these things, we're able to use Jenkins to communicate with that instance and deploy this, all right, on that server. All right. So your website is up and running, and then you can go ahead now and, all right, just take a look at it. So if you, for example, if this was a real website, right, you review it and then get back to your developers and say, oh, there's this thing I'm seeing here that is not correct. What would they do? They will change the thing, commit it into the Git repo again, and do what? And then the Jenkins pipeline will get triggered. And what happens? You have a new website deployed. All the corrections and everything, all right, would show up. Okay. That's how it works. All right. So any questions before we take our leave? Any questions before we go? Any questions, comments? Any feedbacks before we go? Any feedbacks? Any questions? Yeah, time is up, yes. Yeah, time is up. Yeah, of course, time is up. Thank you. Yeah, so the repo, yeah, I'm going to share the link with us. Of course, yeah, that's what I'm doing. Let me just go to the repo. I'm going to put that in the chat right now. All right, so that's the chat. All right, so that's the repo. I've shared the URL with us. So you can clone the repo and do whatever it is that you want with it. Okay. All right. So let's take a few questions before we take our leave. Yeah. So Shion, you can go ahead.
Hello, sir. Okay.
Yeah.
So sorry,
Please
I
go
think
ahead.
some people in my I think some people in my neighborhood are doing. So the point is, for me, I want to ask, what is the expected learning modalities? Are we supposed to be doing it the same time you are doing it, or is this supposed to be something that we're going to do during the week? What is the model? What are the expectations of the students in terms of being able to
Yeah.
catch up with
So
you?
okay. All right. Now, what I will advise, because if you want to follow, all right, what I am doing at the same time, number one is going to slow us down in the class. All right, because we have to understand that this is not a one-on-one session. All right, we have many people on the call. So what I advise is whatever it is that we have taught in the class, all right, take a note. Now go back to your notes and try to implement it. Now, if you're having any difficulties, you can go back to the recording and watch the recording again. All right, that way it's going to help you to, all right, learn better. Because you can imagine if everybody's following what I'm doing at the